Number one Ibble Dibble here. Hello, friends. This is a disclaimer. I'm giving you fair warning. Don't say I didn't tell you so. This video is more or less a 25-minute long unhinged rant on the conditions of the working poor in the United States, only tangentially linked to Meghan. It is not lighthearted. If you are interested in jokes and fashion, maybe come back next week because this one is going to be a two-parter. In my video about the Archwell Impact Report, I criticized its total lack of transparency in reporting and accounting, specifically the absence of any dollar amounts of any kind. I also criticized the large number and unrelated nature of Archwell's quote-unquote organizational partners and the relatively small sums given to each, when published sums could be found. I criticized how, when possible, Archwell tries to do business in kind, demanding H&M's travel expenses and appearance fees are paid by a charity in exchange for the publicity they bring, which will in turn hopefully, but not necessarily, bring in more donations than usual from other people. An example of this is Meghan's speech at the Women's Fund of Central Indiana. I also criticized their simply being cheap. Meghan flew in a private jet with a personal photographer to Uvalde just to give snacks to volunteers and donate a nominal sum, not even the whole amount, to help build a new playground in exchange for photo ops at the cemetery. How macabre. These are red flags indicating that Archwell's strategy is not actually to create meaningful impact through giving, but to get the most bang for their public relations and branding dollars. Archwell is not actually about helping people who aren't Harry and Meghan. In other words, it's a sort of charity scam, and they're definitely in on the act. What I didn't criticize in that video was any particular organization they chose to work with. Typically, I see the charities as the victims in this scenario. However, there are at least a few situations where I feel Meghan and Harry have not only abandoned discernment in their choice of charity, but carelessly hooked up with fellow grifters. I was sort of looking for the opportunity to really highlight the differences between a small charity with clean books doing meaningful work and some sketchy place Meghan and Harry seem happy to associate themselves with. When I recently read Meghan's October 2022 interview with Variety magazine, I think I found a great example. Remember how I told you there was a weird little postscript to the interview? Let's take a listen.
As it continues to expand its philanthropic footprint, Meghan and Prince Harry's company, Archwell, has lent its support to the Marshall Plan for Moms. Led by CEO and founder Reshma Saujani, the organization was built around easing the challenges of the pandemic for women caring for children while working. The group targets several important areas: pay equity, reproductive rights, mental health, and rallying private employers to advocate for public policy. It serves roughly 25,000 families, and Archwell is a financial supporter and founding member of the project, launched in May. In the U.S., one of the biggest barriers to winning policy change is that as a society, we don't value our mothers and all of the invisible work they're doing to make our families, our businesses, and our entire country function, said Saujani. So when Meghan Markle, who is an icon to so many people, uses her platform to stand up for moms and to lend a voice to that experience, she's sending a powerful signal that we matter and our needs are important. Meghan describes the group as an incredible organization that works nationwide to give families all the help they need at this moment. She adds, "Their work is in alignment with the work that is deeply important to me, personally, and that I will continue to do."
So I have questions. First, who is Reshma Saujani? Is she a respectable, charitable individual apart from dealing with Meghan? Or are they in cahoots? Second, what's the actual plan part of the quote-unquote Marshall Plan for Women? The remit of pay equity, reproductive rights, and mental health sounds amazing, but also suspiciously, extremely, unrealistically broad. There are organizations that focus solely on each of these causes using aggressive legal means and have still accomplished shockingly little in terms of new laws on the books and improved enforcement of existing laws. If quote unquote rallying private employers to advocate for public policy is the plan, that's the most disingenuous shit plan I've ever heard in my life. Insultingly so. It insults the intelligence of people they are asking for money. These are obviously quite complicated topics, but I'll try to address each element of the remit as succinctly as possible and link my sources in the description box. Last thing I want to say before I get rolling, this is not about politics to me. This is about humanity. Before you comment, please consider the difference. Number one, pay equity. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 prohibits pay discrimination on the basis of sex, yet according to the US Census Bureau, women currently make 82 cents on the dollar a man makes working the same job. So 42, not all 50, but 42 of the United States have enacted laws related to pay transparency, retaliation, and annual pay data reporting to try to enforce equal pay practices and eliminate discrimination. So, what is the Marshall Plan for Women trying to do here? Is it trying to enact laws in states without current protections? Is it trying to improve enforcement in states that already have them? Which states is it operating within? And most importantly, is it focusing on the neediest women? Or is it focusing on very visible, lean in type female execs whose voices are already over amplified? The ones talking in op eds in the New York Times and the Washington Post about their career struggles or the boys' club corporate culture of one of their past workplaces. These women, for all their completely justified complaints, still have it really great compared to the 46% of Americans who didn't have more than $400 in the bank back in 2016, even before COVID. The neediest American women suffer much more from at-will employment, minimum wages below a living wage in all 50 states. Let me anchor that claim with a statistic to give you some perspective. The national average minimum wage is $9.08 per hour. That would cover 74% of the bare minimum living costs for a single adult, and just 54% of the cost of living for a family with 2 children and 2 working adults. In other words, no matter how you slice it, even living in the cheapest state in the union, even choosing to forego having families they can't afford, working full-time, even overtime at minimum wage, these people cannot pay their bills. And that's not even accounting for tipped employees whose income is on average significantly lower. If you've been to a diner in America and your waitress is a single mom, she's living in poverty. Working people we see every day live in poverty. There's so much debate in the US over $15 per hour minimum wages, which worked at 135 hours per month, a number I'm choosing because 136 hours per month is the legal threshold for employers providing health care. And these big corporations will do absolutely anything to avoid paying for workers' health care. So at just under full-time employment, that minimum wage would guarantee these workers $24,300 a year, and that still doesn't cut it. In 2022, the poverty guideline for a family of 4 was $27,750 a year. The debate has truly revealed how poor the average American is. And I think it's revealed how little the average American gets paid to do usually at least semi-skilled labor. 44.76% of the population of the United States earns $30,000 per year or less. It's not just minimum wage workers. Most people in America are living hand to mouth. And on student debt or some unexpected emergency, it's game over. Of course, pay equity matters. Women are not compensated or cared for when bowing out of the workplace during their reproductive years. They miss out on promotions, company matched investments, and Social Security contributions, even in otherwise fair workplaces. Women unfairly live with less and retire with less. But honestly, sadly, it's simply not the worst of it. A full 50% of American women ages 55 to 66 have no retirement savings, $0, compared to 47% of men in the same position. The real issue is clearly not that 3% difference, though it does matter. The real issue is obviously that half of Americans have nothing to live on once they're too old and or sick to work. Can't wait to see how Reshma and Meghan solve this problem. Number 2, reproductive rights. What does this even include? Is this about reasonable, gender-neutral paid parental leave policies? Is it about ensuring women in all states have access to quality gynecological care and or safe abortions, especially in dangerous circumstances, whatever their employment status or depending on their employer? This by itself is such a broad and complicated topic. I can't even imagine what Meghan the Nitwit would try to do in this space, especially considering her supposed political goals. Number 3, mental health. Good mental health and hygiene is of paramount importance and exponential benefit to physical health and productivity within current and future generations. There is simply no doubt about it. That said, awareness is not the issue. Stop pretending awareness is the issue. It's the tip of the iceberg. In 2021, approximately 30 million Americans of all ages, a full 9.2% of the American population, had no health insurance of any kind. These are people who might make just a bit too much to qualify under the grueling poverty standards required to receive Medicaid in their state, but still have to choose every single month between rent, a doctor's visit, food on the table, keeping the lights on, transportation to their underpaying job. In the end, they have chosen to literally risk death by disease or injury rather than guarantee it via homelessness or starvation. If you're not from the US and you're wondering how poor do you have to be to qualify for Medicaid in the US, the state with the easiest eligibility in 2023, the state where you can qualify making the highest amount of money in the entire United States, the most generous state, is Massachusetts. An individual, a single person household in Massachusetts, has to earn less than $19,392 per year and have absolutely nothing in assets to qualify. Simultaneously, average rent for a studio apartment in Massachusetts is $1,400 per month. It can be as low as $800 in the Boondocks and as high as $2,400 in Boston. The waitlist for government subsidized housing is between 1 and 5 years. If you are a single person on a single income living in a studio apartment, you are last on the list. So let's say 4 or 5 years. In other words, if you make just a couple $100 over this impossibly low income level. Say you make $19,892 per year and not $19,391 per year. And assuming, and this is a big assumption, that you are wage labor and your company is adequately withholding taxes from your paycheck, so you will owe $0 in taxes come tax time. Although the reality is that most people, even at this very low income level, still end up owing at least a few $100s every April. You are expected to pay $17,000 per year in rent, less the penalty of around $1,000 come tax time for not buying private health insurance, because all people in the US who make over $12,000 per year must pay income tax and are subject to that penalty. That leaves you with $157 per month or $40 per week to cover all food, utilities, out-of-pocket healthcare, and transportation. Do you think you could get by on $40 per week? What if you get a toothache? What if a bus hits you crossing the street? And again, Massachusetts is the most generous state. Do you want to hear how little you have to make in the least generous state to qualify for Medicaid? First of all, many states simply do not offer Medicaid for individuals. Period. The end. If you are not a parent, no matter how little you're paid, you get nothing. Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, and Wyoming? I'm looking at you. But what about for parents? They're the ones that really need it, right? The 2022 federal poverty level for a family of three is $23,030, meaning any family making below that amount lives in poverty. However, in the least generous state to families, the state of Texas, you need to bring in less than $3,728 per year for a family of three to qualify for Medicaid. People are going without electricity, without heat, without food, and obviously without medical care. Mental health care is wonderful, it's essential, but even more wonderful and essential is basic health care, the provision of which would prevent a lot of the mental health problems in the United States. Rallying private employers to advocate for public policy hasn't worked thus far because it's these same big employers that make big campaign donations and spend a lot of money lobbying the Congress and the Senate, fighting to keep minimum wage literally unlivably low. Criminalized unions offer at-will hourly wage-based work that allows them to fire employees at the drop of a hat for any or no reason with no notice, and schedule employees for just under the 130 hours of work per month that would require the company to contribute to their healthcare costs. Meaning all of these cheap, diabolical companies have many more employees than they actually need, driving down pay rates even farther. And all the employees have multiple part-time jobs when in fact they're working much more than full-time hours for most of their lives with no health care, no benefits of any kind. And that's not even to mention the gig economy, where most of these workers should be classified as employees, not independent contractors, not forced to pay quarterly taxes on projected earnings with such small earnings, especially considering the accelerated depreciation of the personal assets they must use to do this gig work. These people are putting miles on their own car, paying for their own computers. It's cheap labor, often below the minimum wage because it's gig work. Just like low-paid wage labor, there are no health benefits, retirement plans, or even consistent hours on offer, despite sometimes making less than the ridiculously low minimum wages we already discussed. These people are required to either pay a $1,000 penalty every year or buy private health insurance, which even for low-income people is at least a couple $100 a month per person. So 18.9% of Americans are living in poverty, living on Medicaid. A further 9.2% of Americans are living still in poverty but unable to qualify for Medicaid. What percentage of Americans have health care provided through their employers or via private purchase? But it is not enough. In other words, they still forego necessary health care because they cannot afford it. Get ready. 60% of private health insurance plans do not provide mental health care, and 43% of Americans lucky enough to receive health care through their employer report themselves as inadequately insured. Let's do the math. That is over 71.1% of Americans receiving inadequate basic medical care. Okay, well, what about the bright side of life? What about people with great jobs that offer good insurance plans that respect the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act of 2008? How many of them received mental health care through their employer? The most recent stat I could find was in 2020, just over 40 million Americans or their family members covered under their plan received mental health care through their employers. So what percentage of Americans is that actually? 12%. 12% of Americans were able to access mental health care in 2020. 12%. But maybe that's fine, right? What percentage of Americans present with mental illness every year? 21%. We are falling short by a full 9% there. So 46% of Americans with mental illness received treatment. In America, the average delay between the onset of mental illness symptoms and their treatment is 11 years. Mental illness and substance abuse account for 1 out of every 8 emergency room visits in the United States because people wait until it's maybe much too late. I'm not saying there wasn't additional out-of-pocket spending among the rich and or desperate. I am saying this system is not working. And it's no wonder that Americans are resorting to unqualified self-help gurus, recreational drugs, legal and illegal, probably net positive, but ultimately insufficient strategies involving highly controlled diet, exercise, and or meditation, religious extremism, other kinds of cult communities, of course, all the online courses, apps, and forums related to same any hack could ever dream up. And in the most tragic scenarios, violence. Awareness is not the problem, and it's certainly not a problem that shitheads like Harry, who conflate bullshit AI life coaching with mental health care, are helping with. Access is the problem. In the country with the highest per capita spend on healthcare and drugs in the world, it is fucking maddening. I need to see a therapist just thinking about it. Just pulling up the numbers to make this video today makes me want to run into the street and scream and cry at people, which I guess I can do because all mental health institutions have been defunded and closed, and almost all hospitals have been privatized. So no one would try to take me anywhere or do anything about it unless I commit a crime and the police show up. Needless to say, I do not believe Meghan is interfacing with the hoi polloi frequently enough to even understand the problems facing the average American today. And I believe that even if she did, she wouldn't care. I don't think she really cares. If she really cared, she wouldn't be giving money to charities whose master plan is to ask bosses to be nicer to us. And the only thing that drives me more cuckoo bananas than the state of affairs in America is selfish, egotistical bitches pretending they're helping in meaningful ways while never intending to. America is a populous country full of hard workers who shouldn't need to beg for charity from bitches like this, who aren't willing to give more than crumbs anyhow, and then demand a photo op and full rights to your life story in exchange. This pitch for the Marshall Plan for Moms plays the same nasty trick as the Archwell Impact Report by counting number of people served rather than specifying dollar amounts spent and services rendered. 25,000 families served means nothing to me if Meghan counts sending a basket of inspirational bananas and a $20 Starbucks card to 25,000 families as charity. And I think she would because she's done it before. In her partnership with the Ving Project, she donated $1 million, but that was divided among 10,000 women who had to jump through ridiculous hoops to get a one-time payment of $1,000. I'd be on board if they were providing free or subsidized counseling sessions to low-income families, if they were paying for prenatal visits for uninsured moms, if they were working with the ACLU to scout women who have been genuine victims of workplace discrimination in pay. But that's not the impression I get, and I will elaborate my reasons in part 2 of this series. Meghan using the phrase, quote, giving families nationwide all the help they need, end quote, is ludicrous. Haven't these women and their families been through enough? American families are in such a dire state that even if the Duchess gave away every penny she has, which she never would, she could really only have a meaningful impact on a relatively small number of families. And Reshma is only slightly better, calling Meghan an icon standing up for moms. I know when you have a charity, more than half the job is flattering people into donating, but seriously, an icon for what moms? Standing up to who? When? What the fuck is she talking about? It's awkward. That's enough for today's ranting. I will see you tomorrow to really get down to brass tacks. Moms first with Meghan and Reshma. Toodles. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.